Hasen-Bräu Augsburger Original.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. Today, one from the great city of Augsburg, which is in Bavaria, would you believe? And this is the Augsburger Original Naturtrübes Kellerbier from the Hasen-Bräu Brewery, which has got a bit of a pedigree. They have been going since 1464. There are records going back in I think it was a tax return or some kind of tax ledger that state that on the site of their brewery there was a brewer there, and they've used that as the start of their lineage as a brewer. Now, there's been a little bit of an upheaval in the history. It was a tavern at one point, then a brewery and a tavern, etc. But there has always been a brewery on their old site. There has been some changes in the early 2000s and mid 2000s, so that is a little bit obscure at the moment, but nevertheless it has got quite a long history. Now, it's based in the city of Augsburg, which is in Bavaria. There's a few brewers there, but these, I think, at the moment are the second biggest brewer there. I do recall a friend of mine years ago we was talking about the Oktoberfest in Munich, and he's been to both. He went to, well, I say both. He went to, in case you don't know, Oktoberfest is not just Munich. They have it all around Germany as well, especially in Bavaria. All the towns and cities have a beer festival, and it's basically the breweries showcasing their beer, and as a celebration of, I think it was it Max Joseph, the marriage of Max Joseph, something to do with the House of Wittelbach. There was a marriage, and that's basically what it's celebrating, but it's just an excuse to get absolutely fucking mullered. Anyway, he was saying to me that the Oktoberfest that he went to in Augsburg was one of the best he's ever been to, and he said to me, forget Munich, go to Augsburg. Their Oktoberfest is much better. It's not as big, it's not full of tourists, and it's more of a genuine German Oktoberfest than Munich. Munich's very commercialised, and you see some of the footage of it, and yeah, it's just fucking carnage. You know, fat Americans drinking beer. No disrespect to any American viewers. I have equal disdain for every nationality, including my own, so don't worry about that. Fucking keep digging, we can still see you. I'm joking, of course. We've all been drunk and we've all made complete tits of ourselves, so who am I to cast aspersions? Anyway, there's a little bit of an interesting story about the label. So if you look on here, there is a rabbit, and that logo of the Hasen-Bräu Brewery dates back to the early 1700s, when the landlord of the tavern that was there, I think he was brewing some beer and he was hanging about, and he saw a rabbit come into the tavern, and he thought, right, that's going straight into a stew. He chased the rabbit, and the rabbit was too quick for him, and he fell flat on his face, and apparently did some damage to his boat race as well. So I don't know, it probably wasn't his idea to use that as a trademark, but that is the reason there is a rabbit on there. The brewery, as I mentioned before, it's gone through a little bit of a I wouldn't say a turbulent history, but there have been some changes in the history. If you know your World War II history, and I know I keep fucking sounding like Uncle Albert when I do, I always mention World War II if I can in these beer reviews, but Augsburg was quite heavily bombed during World War II by both the British and the United States Army Air Force, and this brewery was almost destroyed completely. There was only a part of it left, but from them ashes they did rise again, and by 1950 they were back up to full strength brewing beer. In 2004 they were taken over by Dr. Oetker, who, if you know the Dr. Oetker brand, it owns Radeberger, and Radeberger are their alcoholic beverages brand, and they own quite a lot of German breweries, quite a few in Bavaria as well, and these are one of them. I suppose it's the equivalent of, I don't know, one of the big macro brewers like Marston's Carlsberg, AB InBev, that kind of thing. It's a bit like that. They've got quite a few brewers underneath there. Now it's interesting that the brewery has been completely moved from the original site. So, as I mentioned earlier, the lineage dating back to 1464, on the original site there was a brewery. That site is no more. Apparently it's been demolished now for housing, and the brewery has moved. The bottling for this beer is done in the Kellerbier brewery, which is based in Fürth in Bavaria, which is near Nuremberg. Tuka being a huge brewer in that region. I've actually been to Nuremberg, and everywhere you go, it's just Kellerbier. It's not the greatest beer in the world, to be honest. When you're talking about Bavaria, it's not bad in the grand scheme of things, but there are better beers. And if you're in Germany and you see Kellerbier, try and hunt out something else, because I will say the Weiss beer that they do is quite good, but everything else, very hit and miss. But there you go. Another interesting little fact about Augsburg is that they took their brewing very, very seriously indeed. So seriously they had their own beer purity laws dating back to 1156. So that's more or less 360 years before the original 1516 Reinheitsgebot was introduced. So they were doing that a long, long time before that was introduced. The Reinheitsgebot, it doesn't really mean much. In fact, it was introduced so as good quality ingredients were not being used to brew beer when they could be used to make foodstuffs. That's the only reason the Reinheitsgebot was brought in. It wasn't as a mark of quality or anything like that, as some brewers or some brewing historians would have you believe. It really wasn't. It was introduced so that good quality malt was being used for bread and not used for brewing. So you can read into the Reinheitsgebot. I used to think it was a mark of quality. Then the more research you do on it, you realise it really isn't. It's more about upholding a tradition, and a medieval tradition of putting foodstuffs of higher importance over beer. So that's why it was introduced. Anyway, now we've got that out of the way, let's investigate the beer. Rightio, this is a 500ml bottle. It is 5.4%, which is about the higher end of the ABV scale for a Kellerbier. Naturtrub's Kellerbier, in case you're wondering what a Kellerbier is, it's basically an unfiltered lager. It's how beer was served back in Germany. Even up to the turn of the 20th century, it was being served like this. Cold filtration and that kind of thing, pasteurisation, is a relatively new thing. So just bear that in mind. There is no brew sheet on the website for this particular beer, unfortunately, but they do make a big thing about using hops from the Hallertau region and local Bavarian malt. The water that's involved, they didn't mention. I would like to assume it comes from a natural spring. There are lots of them in Bavaria. However, I can't confirm or deny that. So there you go. Let's get it open and let's see what's going on. Rightio, there is quite a nice cap on this. I'll give you a look. It's got the old rabbit that matey smashed his face up on. I bet he'd had a few when he went chasing that rabbit. Everyone's confident when they've got a beer inside them until their face meets the floor, as I can attest to with quite a few UDIs in my time. And if you're wondering what UDIs are, they're unidentified drinking injuries. There it is in the glass. Yes, it is hazy, as I would expect from a Kellerbier, but not as hazy as some of the Kellerbiers that I have seen. On the nose, oh, it actually smells quite nice, quite sweet and malty. It does smell quite appealing. There is a slightly sulphurous note on it. you do get that from time to time on Kellerbiers. I'm trying to detect usually when I have Kellerbiers, and I have done a few recently, my mate Norby's brought a few over, as he's brought this over as well, you normally get a little tiny sour note on it. I'm not quite getting that yet, but it does smell nice, I have to say. There's quite a hefty dose of bready toasted malt on there, slight lemon citrus, slight sulphurous aroma, and that's about it. Interesting and not unpleasant. Let's get it down my fat Gregory Peck. Zum Wohl, as we say in Germany. Oh, that's quite nice. I have to say that is probably one of the sweetest Kellerbiers that I've tried. Interesting. That's actually really weird. That's a really odd finish. There's a whole lot of flavour on the palate. Quite sweet, quite bready, malt. Then you let it go down, and then there's nothing for a while. Then all of a sudden, there's a bitterness to it, like a kind of a hot bitterness. I'm not saying it's unpleasant. It's just a little bit odd. Let me dive in a little bit more, see what we can get on this. I have to say, it does look nice. Very cloudy. Yeah, that's really strange. Finish is very late on it, but it's there. Quite nice toasted white bread, and a very late hop note on there, spicy and herbal hop note. Nice, as Kellerbiers go, not unpleasant. I'll just show you what it's like. And now I've just noticed that, disregard everything I've said, because there has been a huge dose of yeast that has just gone in. I've just seen it go in there in the end. So this is going to taste completely different. So that's what it tastes like when you don't have all the yeast in there. This Kellerbier can be very much like Weizen, and by that I mean you have to get all the yeast in there, otherwise you get a completely, and I do mean completely, different flavour profile. So let's try again. Oh yeah, now that's what I was looking for. There's much more of a finish on there now, and it's an immediate finish, and it's quite long lasting as well. The yeast has brought out a little bit more of that sweetness that I was getting on the aroma, and it's also brought out the slightly sour note that I always look for in a Kellerbier, because Kellerbier does contain some of the yeast that's been used in the brew, and that does give it a slightly sour note. But I have to say, this isn't a bad one. Yeah, it's lovely. It's really nice. I'm getting some of it. I'm getting a fair amount of that honey that you get from the yeast in a lot of Bavarian Helles, which, to be honest, this is kind of a Bavarian Helles. It just hasn't been filtered. But again, I want to reiterate how important it is to get everything in there. And if there's yeast sediment in there, which there is in this particular Kellerbier, you are going to miss out if you don't get it all in there. It really is a strange flavour profile without all of the yeast in there, as is Weissbier as well, as I mentioned. Yeah, that's nice. Full-bodied, drinkable. Some flavour, but the flavour profile isn't massive, so you're not going to get tons and tons of that liquid bread. You're going to get some on the finish, you're going to get a little bit on the palate, but you also get a nice, very, very subtle sourness to this, which is not unpleasant. Don't let that put you off if you're not a fan of sour beer. It's very subtle. You probably won't even taste it if you're not looking for it. And there's quite a bit of a noble hop character on the finish as well. I am getting some of the Hallertau hops that they use, which variety I sadly don't know because they don't list it, but it's the usual grassy, herbal, spicy notes. Again, subtle though. And that's nice. That's a good, solid Kellerbier. So what is the verdict on the Augsburger original from Hasen-Bräu? Yes, very nice indeed. Does exactly what a Kellerbier should. A Naturtrübs Kellerbier. If you're wondering what Naturtrübs is, it just basically means it's not been filtered. And I like it. That is quite nice. And I don't know how much this is going to be over in the UK, and I'm not sure how hard it's going to be to find in the UK. This was brought over from Germany by a mate. So again, when I do these reviews, I always make it known how easy this is to get over in this country, in the UK. And if you're in America or in Australia, I know there are quite a few subscribers from the States and from Australia and New Zealand as well. I think you're going to have an even harder time trying to find it. So why am I reviewing it? Well, it's here and I've got it in my hand, and it would be rude not to. That's why I'm doing it. I must say, I'm looking at the bottle and I do like the artwork on it. It really does look traditional. If you can see that, all that Germanic font that's on there. I do like the rabbit on there. Nice story behind that. And yeah, that's really nice. I do like that. So I'm going to give that an 8.5 out of 10, and I think that's a worthy 8.5 out of 10. Very nice, very drinkable. Not the best Kellerbier that's out there, and I will say for me the best one is the Hacker-Pschorr. The St. Georgenbräu is another good Kellerbier as well, which is relatively easy to get in the UK, as is the Hacker-Pschorr. I think the Hacker-Pschorr Kellerbier is relatively easy to find worldwide, so if you can find that, you're in the sort of top band of Kellerbiers. When you taste that, that's the one you should be judging all other Kellerbiers. Sadly, I don't think this is up there with it, but it's certainly no slouch. I do like it, and that's a worthy 8.5 out of 10. And remember, beer is working class champagne.